So, hello, Emergent Media Production. Yesterday I gave a talk that I would like to share with you. It's relatively short, but it is about augmented reality specifically for study away students. So, people on the experience of studying abroad or studying away. That's my dog. I'm sorry about that little noise. Anyway, shh. So I want to share this with you. Clearly, you're not necessarily studying away, but how might this inspire your augmented reality projects? So the first question is, what is AR? We have started this conversation. How to get started. Again, this is not geared at you, although it kind of is, but really for anybody. How is this technology accessible? And then 16 project ideas, and here's where it becomes relevant to you. So what is augmented reality? And a few definitions. This is from an article we have that we will be talking about when we're next together. So it's been on our syllabus, I think, for 2 different days with the 2 different revisions, but we haven't talked about it yet. So that's upcoming. So augmented reality, AR, is defined as a technology that mixes the real environment with the virtual, is registered in 3 dimensions, real-time, and interactive. And here is where the way that we're using augmented reality does and does not match up with that definition. So are we interactive? So this is something that we can talk about, but most certainly we are mixing the virtual and the real, and working on this. So here are a few other definitions. These are dictionary definitions. So an enhanced image or environment as viewed on a screen or other display produced by overlapping computer-generated images, sounds, or other data on the real-world environment. And so this, I think, what's interesting about these is that these are current and contemporary definitions that have more to do with current usage of augmented reality. 2 more. An enhanced version of reality created by the use of technology to overlay digital information on an image of something being viewed through a device such as a smartphone or camera, and technology that superimposes a computer-generated image on a user's view of the real world, thus providing a composite view. So a few definitions to get started. Essentially, there's something physical, something virtual, and more important than that, something new that happens because of this interaction. So Jason Farman is a theorist who we're also going to talk about when we talk about Tony Liao, and he talks about, for example, GPS. So when you're navigating space through GPS, you understand that space differently because of what the map is telling you. It's an inherent connection between these 2 things, such that the road ahead of you is different because you're looking at a digital map that's telling you where you're going, which is very different than not having that information. So there's something else happening between, when the virtual and the physical come together. Understanding augmented reality, so physical place is transformed because of this virtual layer, the most immediate example, GPS. The virtual is also transformed because you're in a physical place. So the Tony Liao talks about some what I would call protest art, or sort of social memorials, historicizing and memorializing place. And if you see an image of a skeleton at a border wall, that image of a skeleton is not, he Halloween. It means something else, right? It means something different. So it might be the same virtual content, but because you see it in a particular place, it suddenly has a very different meaning. The context is totally shifted because of the physical place. And that's one thing that, with the AR books, they might or might not. So augmenting place is one thing, augmenting a book is another thing. You can also augment a map, or you can make a book that has to be read in physical space or in some way, brings place into the conversation. So anyway, back to this definition. So physical place is transformed because of the virtual layer, as with GPS, and then virtual information is transformed because of the physical layer, as with the image of a skeleton placed at a border wall, memorializing something that happened there. So something new comes of the combination of the virtual and the physical, and they're different than they would have been if they were looked at independently. Okay, so there's a lot of excitement and possibility with AR. There's so much you can do. This is sort of a hokey picture, but kind of interesting, a virtual flash mob. So our augmented reality flash mob. There's so much that you can layer. If you think of like Yelp, for example, if you're driving, and most recently I was looking for parking lots, right? And I can pull up a map that will show me where the nearest parking lot is. Perhaps you're looking for something more interesting. Perhaps you're looking for a coffee shop or a theater venue, or I don't know, or a good restaurant, right? And you can pull up Yelp reviews in real time. So anyway, it's sort of interesting using, not that that is virtual, anyway, using virtual technology to navigate physical space. There are also, of course, some concerns. And I know many of you have seen this episode. It's on the syllabus. If you haven't, please watch it, partly because it informs this discussion, and partly just because it's really great. It's really well done and smart and very funny. In this episode of Black Mirror, which is sort of it's called The Twilight Zone with technology, a dystopian and quite scary universe if technology goes too far. So in this, facial recognition is used, so people have a number that comes up, and it's almost like credit score, but not for credit, just for everything, for your personality, for your, and so it becomes a status symbol. People become obsessed with it, and if you don't have a certain score, you can't access certain parts of society, right? And so what does that mean, and how does that reflect, on current systems that are actually in place so they don't scan faces per se, and sort of what are the implications of this, and how far is going too far with the technology. So there is an app currently in reality separate from this that allows your face to be a virtual business card, so that you can use this app and scan. I haven't made a profile on this, right? But let's say I make a profile, and I'm giving a presentation, you can hold up your phone, see my face, and access my business card, or my CV, or that sort of thing. And while that is amazing, right, is that like I can be talking or giving a TED talk or whatever, and you can access this information about me, or I can access this information about you. The question of who has control of that, issues of privacy, there's just a whole lot that comes up, issues with how accurate the technology is, just issues to look at and discuss, and perhaps with those issues as creative makers, right? You're creative makers, so to also be thinking about those issues in what you're making, right? How do you make a project that might address some of this, or if you don't address some of this, where is it in relation to your work? So we're sort of focusing on other aspects of augmented reality that don't cross over with this, or is this sort of inspiring what you're doing, or are you in some way in conversation with these more complex, let's say, sides of the technology? Okay, so who uses AR and how? This is where the Tony Liao and Lee Humphreys article becomes really interesting. Why are early adopters and creative media makers using AR? So this article was written several years ago, as AR is relatively new, and the two scholars went in to find, identify, and then speak with early adopters, people who are getting started with AR as makers, most of them, and why are they using this to make? And so two things come of this. Two things relevant to us, two things that I want to bring to our attention. One is how AR is used, and then one way it can be used to help people navigate space. So the examples I was giving, like finding parking lots or using GPS, but two, it can be used to transform the meaning of place, and that again, like skeletons at the border wall is the example that he gives, that they give, but yeah, so one is just making a place accessible, allowing someone to navigate it, and the other is shifting the meaning of that place. And those are two different ways of using augmented reality, and two different sort of intentions. The other thing, this comes up later, but is not particularly tied to this article, but I think it's something this article brings to our attention, is audience. And one thing that in these conversations, one thing that came out is that some people are making projects that will be, used by many people. So Yelp, for example, or GPS, or some sort of app that allows you to review restaurants or something that is made for a general audience. But many people also, and I think this is interesting to us as well in terms of scale and these types of projects, are making augmented reality projects that are not for a general audience, therefore maybe an audience of one, right? Somebody making an augmented reality, I think it was Star Wars for her nephew or something like that, so that when he went into his bedroom, he could, use a phone, and I forget which character it is, but you can read it in the article. Darth Vader, someone from Star Wars, is there in his bedroom. You'll laugh when you read it, and it's not Darth Vader. But the point is, like, your favorite superhero, right, in your bedroom. And that's something that I've thought about, right? How do I use augmented reality? And right now, there are many parts of my world, but one of them is that I'm a mom to 3-year-old twins, and they're right now learning the alphabet. And augmented reality is used now in early education as a teaching tool, right? And so what if we have the letters, right? Or they color the letters, and then we look at that through a phone. They're obsessed with phones, and words that begin with that letter, that have that letter sound come up. So augmented reality may be used for a mass audience, for a specific audience, for organizing a flash mob or a virtual flash mob, but could also be an audience of one, could be an audience of you or your best friend. So in designing 16 projects, hold on, where's my project slide? Project ideas. In designing project ideas, I was really thinking about this, that the audience might be the student who is studying away, right? Or the audience might be people in the place that one is studying, or people back home. So an audience, all right? So step by step, we've already kind of done this. These apps are free or inexpensive. We're using Aurasma this semester. Blip AR is another really good one. Layer is particular to the iPhone and also has a slight charge with it per aura that you make, so I wouldn't suggest it for our purposes, but it is great for other purposes. Blip AR, I believe, is free and easy to use and easy to get started on, and then Aurasma, the details on. So we don't need to do this because we've already done it. Step by step, you already know you need an image, you need an overlay. When you put them together, it's an aura. So your image is your picture, your overlay in our case is your video file in most cases, and then the aura is what happens when the video file is not there but is triggered by the picture. Project considerations, again, this is not per se for you. It was for this talk that I was giving. However, it is for you as we are making this. So 1, who is the project for? Who is your audience? 2, what is it that you're augmenting? And we have looked mostly at books. In this class in the past, people have made books. We tried to do a map, but it's very hard to do because of the way Aurasma works with pictures. It's hard to do physical spaces, but you can easily do a picture of a space. So you can still ask people to navigate space, but what they trigger is a picture. But you could do postcards, or people in the past have also done card games. So anything like that would work. Why is it augmented? So this, I think, is really important for you. If you can, when you articulate your idea, if it could just as easily be, a Tumblr page or a Wix or an Instagram account or, a social media story, then why is it augmented? And maybe it shouldn't be, right? Maybe something should be tweaked in the idea. So I think, what is it about this place or this book? I think fashion magazines, for example, I know someone may be working on a fashion magazine, that sort of like bringing the runway to life, right? We're so used to fashion magazines as physical things, so to augment that, that makes sense, right? And something that you have to go to a physical place or a postcard and have that like jump off the page. If you want that intimacy of holding something, it makes sense. But if your project could just as well be a series of videos that are posted on YouTube, then make webisodes, right? It's not so So maybe tweak the idea so that you're really doing something that speaks to this technology and uses what this technology does well. Otherwise, it's going to seem like a gimmick. And when you hold the book or the whatever it is and the phone, we're going to say, why are we holding these things? Why don't you just put this on YouTube, right? So really think of an idea, and let me know if you want to bounce ideas or further ideas that has someone engaging with the technology in a meaningful way, which means engaging with the virtual content and the physical content, whether that's walking through physical space or holding an item, and the way that these things go together. Okay, quick tips for video. I would recommend more and shorter. We've talked about this together. For audio, I'd keep in mind that whatever soundtrack you design, your work is also going to be looked at in a place. So if I need to go to, the bell tower to access a certain part of a narrative that unfolds in space, I need to keep in mind that the bell tower is a noisy place, and that when I watch the video, you might recommend that your users, have headphones, or you might go minimal on the sound because the sound of the bell tower is going to be very loud, and then maybe for the next video where we go inside, the sound becomes more important, something like that. The sound of the place becomes part of your project. Image and text, where to put image and what, if you have a story, what content should be text and what content should be image, is a really important question and one that you'll need to answer for this type of project. Let the first frame of the video be the trigger image and the video will jump off the page. So we've already seen this when you had a picture of yourself and you augmented it. If the picture is the first frame of the video, then it's like that picture comes to life. Yesterday in this presentation, which was also with Mike Kettemeyer and Anula Shetty, who are amazing artists. I'm very inspired by what they do, and they're nice. They're just very cool people. Anyway, they also talked about erasure. So they had an image that had multiple things in it, and when you triggered it with augmented reality, something disappeared. So if you have the frame in the book and the video are the same to begin with, and then something appears from that or disappears from that, that can be a nice way to connect what might otherwise feel like two disconnected mediums, right? A print project and a virtual project. So this is a way to draw a link between them. And it's a technique I've seen work really well. I think it can work well for your projects. Full screen or tracking, we've talked about. This came directly from our discussion. Ask yourself why. I already talked about this. And include phones in the video. So last year, someone for a final MA project did a project where a woman held a picture frame to the camera. And as she held that, you're looking at me on a camera right now, so you can maybe imagine this. As she held the frame to the camera and I was holding the phone to access the work, I felt like I was physically holding a frame and she was physically holding a frame, and it's like our frames matched, right? It's like an interesting connection between me as the reader and her as the person in the video, and I just think that worked really well. So again, it also worked well because it accessed the idea of a frame, and it's a video and it's a phone, so it worked well in a rectangular kind of way, but also just in terms of that matched action. So those are my tips for you in terms of makers, strategies you might want to use. Okay, project ideas. This is particular for Study Away. You can ignore that part, but just think about, what is interesting or not interesting about these 16 ideas, and does it spark anything that you might want to be doing? So in this context, the idea was 4 projects for before you study away, 4 projects for after you study away, and 8 projects while you're there. So starting backwards, of course, why not? After. So the first one, the most obvious, an augmented scrapbook. So while you're studying away, take pictures and videos, and then augment a scrapbook when you return. So who is this for? It's for you, not you, but you standing in the place of the theoretical student who will study away, right? It's for that person. It's a self project. A project for yourself. When do you record? During the experience. When do you enjoy? After the experience. Why? So again, the why would you do this? And it's important to have, a purpose, and artistic exploration is a purpose, but also in this case, memory, a keepsake, and a way to share the experience with others. Augmented cookbook. We've seen a cookbook in our class before that was augmented. So again, one more kind of layer of specificity in, rather than an augmented scrapbook, an augmented cookbook. And this one goes, it's one more step more specific, and so it also has to do with kind of preserving culture, right? There are many different ways that culture is expressed, and food is one of them. So to have a cookbook is more than it seems, right? Because it also is an expression of culture, especially if you think about studying away and making a cookbook while you're in a culture that is new to you. Saturday morning check-in, so every Saturday morning record a video and check in, and then these become sort of an augmented diary. Observing place, so going to a place and observing, making videos, and then either, with voiceover saying what you observe, or with close-up shots, however you use cinematic language. And then when you get home, going to places of the same category, so going to a grocery store, going to a playground, and looking at those videos, and then looking at the place that you're in. Would be a way of engaging two different places and really looking at sort of a cultural study in that way. So again, what's the purpose of that? The purpose is a deep observation of place and sort of an increased cultural awareness. This is a different way of looking. All right, so those are 4 for after you return. Here are 4 for before you go. Number 1, personal tour guide. So do research before you go, record a video, augment a photograph, and then while you're away, use that as your own map. So you are your own tour guide. So do the research first, and then go to the place and then see how the research matches up. So again, do you need augmented reality for this? No, you could pin a Google map, you could, in some other way do this. So it's important to think about, is this relevant? Is this interesting? But this is a way of enacting a map, being your own tour guide, and getting a particular experience of place, an engaging place. So in that way, I think, that there's a case for this one. Living a Legend, I have two versions of this. But I think this one's better. Yeah. All right, so before you go, record a mythology or cultural lore, or find a book with a myth or story from a given culture, and then go to that place and listen to that book while you're there in the physical space. Another one would be to record that story told by someone in that place and of that culture, and then go home or go to a place you consider home, and bring that story with you, essentially by living it in comparable places, right? So on a hillside, so go to a local hillside, that kind of thing, so that you're enacting place, but you're also bringing that cultural story with you. Okay, last one in this category, right? Nope, just kidding. The ever-changing postcard. So before your trip, give your friends a series of images, printed images of places you would like to visit, and then while you're away, augment these videos. And so then your friends at home will have this postcard and can, see if you've been there or not. And I think here's an interesting question, right? I'm always questioning, well, why use this technology? If you could just post Facebook updates, right? So why this? And I think the case is made in that there's a sense of intimacy, right? It's like the postcard, and also a sense of surprise, and also a sense of communication from one person to another person or a small group of people, in the way that, when Snapchat first came out and said we make messages that disappear, that sort of like urgency or connection, or just how that is different from, posting on a Facebook feed for the world to see. This is an intimate form of communication. So the purpose of this is sharing your experience, is connecting with home, and it's sort of an intimate connection between either two people or, one person in a small group of people, but not a mass audience, right? You're not going to give postcards to everybody in the way that, if you post something on Facebook, you do, reach a wider audience than would presumably have the postcard, download the app, etc. Words of wisdom while away, so record videos, or better yet, have someone else record them for you, of support, motivation, etc. And then I think One of these I suggested wallet-size photos. You can bring those wallet-size photos with you while you're studying away. And then when you need it, pull out that motivation. So here's some suggestions. Motivation, study away bucket list, get on it, right? Like do the thing that you said you're going to do. Support, like I miss you too. Or advice, like budget, anything. Yeah, and then the tip, here it is, print wallet-size photos. All right, so we're halfway through. So that is 8 project ideas so far, 4 for after an experience, 4 for before an experience, and now here 8 ideas for during a study away experience. So a visitor's map. This one is made, I think this is interesting, for an audience of next year's students. And actually this idea doesn't come from study away. This comes from the idea of, for example, graduating seniors. Let's talk about Temple's campus for a minute. Graduating seniors looking back on their experience and augmenting a map of Temple with either things you wish you knew earlier on or places that have meaning for you. And the audience of that would be incoming first year students. So if you think about that element of time. So it's written here, it's adapted for the study away context because that's where I was presenting. The idea that if you go study away in Dublin, Ireland, for example, because that's the trip I'm going to be leading, that at the end of that experience, you augment a map of Dublin, and then a year later, the next round of students going to Dublin, Ireland, you know, they have that map and they can see places that you've been. It brings up interesting questions, and it also invites people into a space. So oral history are based on NPR StoryCorps. Record oral histories or conversations and dialogues while in a physical place, and let the stories really focus on local culture, make place relevant to these. And then, you know, who the audience depends. I mean, there's a wide audience for this. So you could be making it to preserve culture that is then experienced in a place for that culture or for visitors or for you. I think this idea is very open. There are a lot of ways this could go. What's the purpose? Cultural preservation, storytelling, connecting to culture, and ethnography. All right, history lessons and memorializing place. This one comes directly from the Tony Liao article, so you can read more about this there, but the idea of championing unheard voices or revealing truths, preserving culture, and vox pop would be an interesting way to do this. So a vox pop is when you ask a bunch of people the same question, and then you smash their answers together. It's a quick way to get a certain kind of public opinion. It's fun to watch because the moments of surprise, like people don't know the question, and we, the audience, sort of hear the answer at the same time as the person recording it here. So you've probably seen this strategy on television or wherever. Television. So a vox pop in a particular place could work well because it records not just the question you're asking, but also the place and the place in time. And that's another thing that is not really focused on in this presentation, but another way to deal with augmented reality is to look at time and time across a place, making history current or recording a certain time, right? What are people wearing? And right now we might not think much of it, but 5 years from now or 10 years from now, as fashion trends and hairstyles and stuff, you know, change, then we'll say, oh, this is so, you know, 1970s, or like, this is so 2017. All right, culture clash, side-by-side images of, you know, things that you perhaps weren't expecting going into a new culture in the context of study away. So putting those things side by side in images, and, you know, there were different ways you could work with the video for that. And the purpose would be sort of a cultural appreciation or an intercultural dialogue. Living language, so whether a foreign language or cultural expressions that are used, give a language lesson in a place. And if you wanted to set this up as instruction art or as a game, you could then ask your user to use that expression in a given place. And this would be best done in a public place, so in a mall or a library or a public square, that sort of thing. Purpose, storytelling, immersion in place, language development, cultural appreciation. Unfolding narrative, I'm really excited about this because I'm really excited about narrative in general. But create a narrative video, whether fiction or nonfiction, that is filmed on location and meant to be viewed in that location. And So for example, you could set geographic boundaries on your triggers such that they'll only trigger if you're on Temple campus, for example. If you do that, I would be careful about that. It's nice that you have the capability to do that, but you may want to also create, say, a backup book or something like that to expand your audience. Maybe not, but it just makes the work more accessible. But I do think that that's really interesting. And also thinking of, incoming first year students, what if they had to then follow that narrative? It was sort of episodic, and those episodes took place in different places of the Temple campus. Fashion blog, there's a lot that could be done with fashion, or weekly check-ins. This is an expansion of an idea that has a slide earlier, but in the context of study away or anything that has a progression of time, it doesn't have to be study away, but checking in regularly. So this is week number 1. I'm most excited about this. I just discovered this. I'm afraid of this. I haven't yet done this. And then you collect those check-ins. And if you're at, week 11 out of 13 and you haven't yet done the same thing, you can sort of see that. And then one thing you could augment is a calendar, which might be kind of interesting because again, you can augment anything, right? So why might it make sense to augment a calendar? Which, you can just pull that kernel of an idea and you could augment a calendar and, in the summer have, images of winter. There's so many different things that you could do. And then you might want to think about why. But I do think that could perhaps be visual poetry. There's a way you could work with that. So that's it. So again, I know this is not directly related to what you are doing, but you are coming up with project ideas, and so I hope that this brainstorm session is helpful, and I look forward to hearing about what you create. All right, see you later.